I could also just very quickly address in the chat, Left Winger 81 asks,
Sure.
have you talked about AOC and her present vote? And I would say I think this is actually a really good example because Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez, the social democratic congresswoman from the Bronx, in most ways, her like policy preferences, what she votes for, what she votes against, what issues she draws attention to, in most ways is what we want. She's a Bernie person, and so at least relative to what Congress is like, she's definitely one of the best, like 10 or whatever, members of that 435 person or 535 counting Senate body. And some criticisms of her are silly, right? We talked about force the vote earlier, but also, as a very flawed politician who I think is a very imperfect vehicle for left politics in many ways that we could get into if that were what the interview were about. She does counterproductive things. She seems to have been one of the main people who was upset that Bernie accepted Joe Rogan's endorsement in the 2020 election, and also.
Oh, really? I didn't know that. Was that really her?
There have at least been many reports of that. It's all about sort of stuff going on inside the Bernie campaign, and as far as I know, she's never denied it.
Okay.
Unfortunately,
right.
It sounds uncomfortably plausible to me, right? That her position.
All right.
But people got we just finished a week of everybody losing their minds, yelling at each other about whether the dress that she wore to the Met Gala was good or bad. Politically. If you don't know what I'm talking about, please do yourself a favor and don't look it up.
And keep not knowing. It's okay.
Maintain yourself in a state of not knowing.
Exactly.
But also the other day there was a vote about military funding for Israel. An extra $1 billion for the Iron Dome defense system on top of all the other billions that were already given to this human rights abuser in military funding. And she was initially voting no, and then it seems whatever, God knows, politicians were always pulled around by different kinds of pressure from different groups, and she changed it from no to present. And it's okay, I don't give a shit about what dress she wears. Words cannot express how little I care about that. I think some of the criticisms of her for not doing this one particular parliamentary tactic 6 months ago that I don't think would have worked anyway, I don't really buy that. But that's pretty bad. Go nuts. She deserves all the criticism she gets over this. And I think the way that it ties into the larger discussion is that people are excessively focused, when they're talking about these left politicians, on this kind of overall moral evaluation, that it's I sort of think of it as it's almost like Adolph Reed, one of the times that Michael was interviewing him on TMBS, had this nice line, about how, he's he's at least culturally Catholic. He, I'm pretty sure Adolph Reed is an atheist, but he sent his son to a rated Catholic school just because it's sort of family tradition or whatever, and so it was really funny coming from him. He was talking about some of what we talked about today with Michael on TMBS, and he said, "Look, ultimately, this is just too Protestant an approach to politics for me. This is it seems to be all about trying to figure out who's going to heaven and who's going to hell." And,
exactly. Yeah.
And that's how I feel about this. It's so much of the online left, and I'm talking both about the people who love her and the people who hate her, seem to be engaged in this never-ending battle about whether AOC is going to heaven or hell. And I don't care, right? I mean, she's a politician. Politicians,
right?
Politicians.
She should be a tool, basically. I mean, if we had a real healthy workers movement, she would be a tool. If she does some missteps, she gets 1 or 2 missteps, and then there's accountability. She gets cut off, or we cut ourselves off, and that's it.
Exactly. Ideally, there would be a strong enough left that we could exert meaningful pressure. That
right.
would be if you vote this way, then we're not going to knock on doors for you next time. We might even endorse an opponent, and that'll be a real threat. And that would happen. But of course, we're not strong enough to do anything like that, so we don't exert nearly enough influence on these politicians. But that's exactly the thing. I mean, other than Bernie Sanders is a saint, but like other than him, politicians. That was a joke. Politicians are. Politicians are tools. That's exactly right. They're not our friends, right? They're not. It's not like.
Of course they are humans. I mean, and that's also why I don't think you should be aware of your parasocial relationship that you have with this person, because you don't know this person. Maybe you know this person, but this person doesn't know you. No, and on the other hand, it's like this person is now two things for you. It's AOC, the person AOC, but it's also the Congresswoman AOC. And in this function, she's just a tool.
No, exactly.
And you should not attach yourself. Yeah.
Exactly.
So, yeah. They're not bringing salvation.
Attachment leads to suffering.
No,
sorry, Star Wars quotes.
Yeah, be less Protestant and more Buddhist about it.
Exactly.
The only
life hacks from Ben Burgess. Be more Buddhist about these kinds of things.
The only people you can have parasocial relationships with are me and Bernie Sanders. Other than that, have a just it's like you don't know these people. They're not your friends. They're also not your, whatever personal enemies. They are either tools of something positive that you can use, or they're impediments to that, in which case, you do that, or as is very often going to be the case, given the largely scattered and powerless nature of the contemporary left, they're going to be a messy combination of the two. And you should give them, you should support them when they're voting the right way, and you should criticize them when they're voting the bad way. And ultimately, you should, desire leads to suffering. You should disengage and try to be more zen about it. Would be my advice. I don't care what dress AOC wears. I don't care. I don't care whether you or I or anybody else thinks that she's ultimately a good person who's destined for a heavenly reward, or a bad person who should suffer. All I care about is how she votes.